there's so many layers to this, and it will depend on companies, and it will also depend on the awareness day, because I feel like there has to be a foundational level of understanding.
We've done some different things in our business on the back of this. We're really passionate about inclusion. We're going to have all of these awareness days. So then we thought, actually, we can't relate to all these awareness days. Are we the best people to be advocating in every single way? Not. So let's have no awareness days.
I found it really uncomfortable, just because it was like, how do you go about that process of choosing what to celebrate and what not to celebrate? Because as much as you may be trying to champion, inspire, raise awareness for certain communities, by not doing the same for other communities, you kind of implicitly send this message that, you know, even one community is more important than the other. You don't necessarily appreciate this community as much.
Are we ostracising?
Exactly.
When we're trying to include.
Really creates this tension.
Awareness day dilemma.
Okay.
Inclusion or performative? Question mark.
That is a meaty one.
Yeah. Awareness day dilemma, inclusion or performative. I love that one.
Oh, my gut reaction.
No pressure, Mac.
Yes, there's so many layers to this. And it will depend on companies. And it will also depend on the awareness day, because I feel like there has to be a foundational level of understanding. And I say that to say, right, if we're looking at International Women's Day, what is it that we're doing? Are we celebrating? Are we championing? Are we raising awareness? There's so many different angles that you can tackle it through. I only recently understood that there's like this commercial organisation that sets their theme for International Women's Day. Have you seen this? They set their theme for International Women's Month, but the official one comes from the UN. It's like the UN's women's program.
Okay.
Sets a theme every year.
Yeah, every year it does. I think it was it was Action this year, wasn't it? It was the Action one.
But there was another theme that was floating around. I can't remember what this year's theme was, but it was set by this commercial organisation that's kind of nothing to do with the UN.
Okay.
And they have their themes, and they do like, you know, the poses that people do and all of this stuff. They just do loads of like commercially gimmicky things.
Okay.
And actually that takes away from the essence of what it is that we're trying to collectively do. And I think oftentimes organisations fall in this limbo where it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we raising awareness of real issues? Are we challenging people to do better? Are we using data to inform what the disparities are? Or are we just doing something to say we've done something? And I think that's where I think it's generally that one, isn't it?
It's really hard. We've done some different things in our business on the back of this. So we started off with, of course, you know, we're really passionate about inclusion. We're going to have all of these awareness days. I mean, but at this point, there's an awareness day for the plant next to me. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, well, can I relate to that? Can we relate, right? But I do think there's a place for them. So then we thought, actually, we can't relate to all these awareness days. Are we the best people to be advocating in every single way? Not. So let's have no awareness days. So then we went to no awareness days, which was interesting. I found personally that some of the things that I'm really passionate about, then I almost thought, well, our business isn't even talking about, because now we've got no awareness days, or I'm not learning about other causes or other advocacy things that these awareness or conversations that these awareness days bring aren't there. So now I'm in a position where I'm like, well, what do we do? Do we celebrate some of these awareness days that the team are kind of enthused to do so? None of these awareness days, all of these awareness days, I don't know what to do.
But what does it mean to celebrate as well? Because I think, again, it's about...
Well, yeah, it's a very good point, actually. Or at least have conversations around it. My initial kind of thoughts was, it goes out on social media and we're like, yeah, we really support, you know, there's like the women in engineering or girls in engineering one, like that sort of stuff. And we've done some really nice pieces around that kind of stuff before. So that's what I was thinking about celebrating. And then I'm thinking about attraction and, oh, wow, you know, look at how amazing our sectors are, you know, where perhaps there's not so much of a talent, you know, talent attraction is an issue within STEM sectors. So just from that lens. But then there's other things that I wouldn't feel that comfortable, me or my team, even talking about. Let's
dig into what you're uncomfortable with. I'll put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it. But
but
one of the things that kind of came to my mind when you're talking there is we've had a similar journey in our business in terms of trying to celebrate as much as possible. I think it's impossible to celebrate everything. But we were in a stage probably a couple of years ago where we were trying to celebrate as much as possible. And I remember the specific occasion that we were really, really busy with projects and events and speaking and all of this stuff. And I remember we all had to do this. It was a couple of years back where it was like the International Women's Day that I pledged to something and you had to pledge.
Yeah.
And we all had our little banners and we all had pictures of us on social media with our pledge hand up. Yeah, dude.
I'm joking. It's a bad joke.
I found it really, really uncomfortable to some extent.
Did you?
Yeah, just because it was like, okay, I'm now in a position where I'm pledging to do something that I would naturally do anyway, and who's going to hold me accountable? So you've got a pledge that is kind of meaningless because nobody's going to come back to me a year from now and say, a year ago you pledged to X, Y, and Z for women. Have you done that? And so, okay, no, but we've got thousands of people all pledging to do something that nobody's going to hold them to account to.
I agree with that, but my counter to that would be, but who are you inspiring?
Which I think is a really good question, because I genuinely don't think that we're inspiring people. I didn't feel it, and it's kind of a difficulty in terms of what does it mean to inspire somebody, and do you ever know?
Do you ever know? Do you know what I mean? But is there someone that's looking at you with your pledge and your hands up and your post? I'm guessing it's some kind of social media type thing. And that person's going, I can relate to Mac, and oh wow, he's pledging to do this. That's going to make. I need to think about, am I showing up in that way? Is it actually provoking that kind of thought and conversation rather than, Mac, did you do it or didn't you do it? I hope you did do it, by the way.
As I said, I feel like I was doing it naturally anyway.
Yeah, you said that.
It's a bit of a meaningless one. It's like I pledged to brush my teeth. But it's a really good point, and I think my take on it, and again, I can only go by my perception. My take on it was because everyone was doing it, I felt that us doing it didn't have that impact that you'd expect it to have. So it's like, okay, if you're scrolling through social media and you see that all of us, I think there was like maybe 14 of us in the team at the time, we've all pledged to do something for International Women's Day. But you're scrolling and every other organisation or every other leader has also pledged to do something. Yeah. Are you then especially inspired by our post?
Yeah.
Especially in the context of what we do, like we're a diversity and inclusion consultancy, so it's like you'd kind of expect us
you would expect you to. I agree with that. It's interesting, like when I look at the International Women's Day stuff, because that's this month really, isn't it, right? Yeah. So it's quite current. I can see impact there. I've got to be honest, I see people, men and women, all talk very passionately actually about the subjects and about the change and making, amazing changes. And I do see, that's why I do see it has impact. I personally feel there is impact there. And I also see things, I'm trying to think, you talked about relatability or what are we comfortable with doing and so forth. I've seen some amazing awareness days, around, for example, South Asian Heritage Month or Day, and the office, and there's this and there's that, and there's people are so excited to be involved. And that's where I probably think of celebration when I'm talking about some of these days. I know that isn't the case for all. And I can see that actually there's team members and employees and business leaders that are really excited to showcase their culture, and other people that are really excited to hear more about a culture that they're not necessarily part of or privy to. It hasn't been their background. So I definitely see the great benefits there. I think where the dilemma is for me is, which ones are you choosing? Is it coming from the people that are in the company? But then does that mean that the company is, there's a sense of belonging for everybody externally and in the company? And that's where I find it a difficult decision. Almost a good example, we don't do any awareness days now, but for example, I'd probably feel a little bit uncomfortable or unsure about how the best way we could celebrate something around like LGBTQ+ to make sure we're doing it in the right way, because there's nobody in our team at the moment that would spearhead that. So I want to make sure what we're doing is right. So then you think, well, actually, should we just not do anything at all? And that's why I talk about where and what and the best way that we are, we're doing the best and giving the best awareness to these awareness days, topics, conversation points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it does speak to authenticity as well. So it's like,
of course.
Actually, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And also, how are you doing it?
Yeah.
But you mentioned something really interesting there about progress being made. I'm saying that, with the gender dynamic, you can see progress being made. And I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of progress being made in terms of gender equality, especially at board level. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're perfect and we've achieved it, but actually we're tending to move in the right direction. The question I would have that underlines that is it because of the awareness days, or is it because of everything that happens outside of that? Because I don't think we can fool ourselves into thinking that a day, a week, a month dedicated to talking about issues and talking about disparities is going to sustain that effort. I think a lot of the progress that's been made is because people have been passionate about it, people have been championing it, people have rolled up their sleeves and done the work that needs to be done to move the dial. I agree with what you're saying to some extent, to say that actually a lot of that inspiration might be birthed in these months or these celebrations, or even just having that conversation to say, right, actually I wasn't aware of that statistic, or I wasn't aware of this person's experience. I think can be quite powerful. The tension I have is that actually, are we taking these opportunities to provoke and inspire, or is it just a good excuse for some fun and some cake and some everyone comes in and gets a meal and goes home and learns nothing about that community, or nothing about the disparities, or nothing, even more damaging, nothing about the action that they need to take to make things better.
Action. Well, so what do you do in your business? Do you celebrate awareness days?
We don't at the moment,
right? So we're both businesses with strong, ED and I, inclusion businesses, and we've both at the moment. And why is that?
For us, it's a case of like, what is or what are our priorities?
Okay.
And at the moment, it's not a priority. We're a significantly smaller team now than we were this time last year or this time 2 years ago. The team we do have are generally very inclusive. Again, it feeds through the work that we do, the conversations we have on a day-to-day basis. We don't need to wait till October to talk about disparities between the Black community and other communities. We don't need to wait until June to talk about LGBTQ plus issues. They are constantly feeding through the work we do, the conversations we have. That's not to say that there aren't areas that we can improve. There always will be. It's just to say we don't necessarily need to wait for a specific month to educate ourselves. We're always trying to educate ourselves.
Which makes sense in your business, right? And I think is showcases a really positive culture that's been built in the business. But what happens on things like social media? So would you go out and say, I don't know, anything, particular celebrations, would you touch on those or not at all?
So we haven't done in the last probably 12 months. Prior to that, we were very good on it, and again, we took it as an opportunity to educate. So again, a lot of what we were doing was really to dispel myths, to kind of ensure that everyone understood what was happening. So what's the significance of Ramadan? What's the significance of Christmas? What's the
so it was more of an educational
Easter? Absolutely.
I like that.
We haven't gone back into that, but again, if we are going to, it will be with that education piece in mind, because it's actually about making sure that people understand the differences between communities, differences between religions, and again, just leaning into the fact that we're all diverse. We all have different faiths, different beliefs, different ways of living, and also there are issues that affect us all differently. The one thing that I think gets lost in this conversation sometimes is that intersectionality, to say how do we account for these multiple disparities that people face. And yes, there are things like awareness days about interfaith communities and multiple areas of disadvantage, but again, how do we draw that thread? We did recently put out a blog post around how organizations should choose what they celebrate or not. And the reason we did that is because we found that
because it is a minefield.
Absolutely, we found that a lot of
you know.
organisations were tripping up on things like International Men's Day. So
Yeah.
you know, there is an International Men's Day.
Yeah.
Recently, there was a lot of problematic discourse around it, and it was kind of linked to this incel culture, the Andrew Tate kind of dynamic, where people using International Men's Day as a means to say, you know, men have been disadvantaged and women are taking over, just pushing really misogynistic.
This really? What?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
okay.
So we had
interesting.
We had probably 3 clients reach out to us to say either they had chosen to advertise International Men's Day, or somebody within the organisation had created a post about International Men's Day and it hadn't been received well.
Oh, wow.
And it really is, for me, it kind of underlines the importance of organisations taking that time to really articulate why you're recognising an awareness day, what you're doing, why it's important to you as an organisation, so that there's no opportunity for people to hijack that or misinterpret it. And what had happened with some of those organisations is that it had been misinterpreted as this Andrew Tate incel dynamic where people are, you know, using it as an opportunity to talk about some really problematic ideologies.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is based on organisations not being definitive about what it is that we're celebrating, recognising, what is the action that we're expecting people to take away, what's the then what, and also not being clear in terms of communicating in a way that invites people into that conversation, rather than people feeling like this is something that's just for people from that community, or this is something that's just for certain groups.
Yeah, interesting.
So you mentioned that you don't do any awareness days. Do you see that changing?
I felt uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
I felt uncomfortable with it this year, and then I had to question myself though and think, are we giving the justice that we need to? So I think that probably will change a little bit.
And was the discomfort what you were saying before in terms of not feeling like you could do it justice?
Yeah, and making sure that ultimately we're being inclusive. You know, because awareness days for me are about advocacy, they're about awareness, you know, they're about understanding different experiences, maybe action or celebration or both on the back of it, or any of the named above. But I think the concern is that making sure that we're doing that absolutely in the right way, being led in the right way. I'll give you a really good example. We do a lot of work in America.
Yeah.
And a little bit different, away from an awareness day, but kind of similar. And of course, everybody's saying as it gets to a certain point in the year, Happy Thanksgiving. And it almost would seem rude for some of my team who work predominantly in America, you know, to not be saying, oh yeah, thanks, Happy Thanksgiving, Happy Thanksgiving. But of course, when you start to look into Thanksgiving, then you're almost like, do I say, is it Happy Thanksgiving, or am I going to offend you by talking about Thanksgiving? So I'm going to say nothing about Thanksgiving. But now the dilemma is, well, hold on a minute, there's, you know, am I connecting, or are we connecting with our client base, our customer base? Take away the internal for a minute, and how do we do that? And that I found to be a real dilemma within this area, and I've still not fully drawn a conclusion on it, to be honest, because there was an uncomfortability for some of my team. They were like, oh my gosh, we need to do a post, come on, we've got to make sure that, you know. And I felt uncomfortable with it personally. When I started to, you know, just to explore a little bit more, I personally felt uncomfortable. But then I also recognise that, you know, this is a great time of celebration for many people. So that's an example of where it's tricky. But then I've also been involved in events where I've seen firsthand the impact that people speaking or sharing their story and sharing their experience has had. Massive impact, massive awareness that stays with me now to this day. So there is a huge value there as well. So it is, in my mind, it's a bit of a dilemma actually.
I think it's a really good example to give in terms of the Thanksgiving dynamic as well, because it's like, okay, Happy Thanksgiving for who? Like, which communities are we talking about? Which communities are we potentially alienating by leaning into some of this? And it's also kind of this tension that we've noticed with businesses in terms of how do you go about that process of choosing what to celebrate and what not to celebrate? Because as much as you may be trying to champion, inspire, raise awareness for certain communities, by not doing the same for other communities, you kind of implicitly send this message that, you know, either one community is more important than the other. You don't necessarily appreciate this community as much.
Are we ostracising?
Exactly.
When we're trying to include.
Really creates this tension, and I think if not handled in a good manner, can actually be super detrimental to kind of the long-term approach or strategy to inclusion.
Yeah.
And I think leaders have to go into that consciously, but also communicatively, to say, us not necessarily formally creating an event around this particular community or awareness day isn't us saying that we're not doing it and we don't care.
Yeah.
It's a case of maybe limited budget, maybe limited bandwidth. Actually, it might be an opportunity to invite people into that conversation, to say, if there's something that you feel passionately about, if there's something that you would want to see us celebrate, come and have a conversation with us. Talk about how can we use it as an opportunity to inspire, to raise awareness, to educate people. And actually, it can be an opportunity for those people to raise their visibility within the organisation as well.
Yeah. So for business leaders, much like me, that's kind of having this dilemma actually at the moment. I know you touched on a blog post as well. What was some of the advice, if you don't mind me asking? Was it to talk internally to the teams and you decide certain awareness days, or to your customer base? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So as a data-driven diversity inclusion consultancy,
go on,
our
Mac.
our advice typically is look at the data. What does the data tell you about who's in your organisation? What does the data tell you about the experiences that they've had, either positive or negative? And then also widen that, what does the data tell you about the communities that you serve? Again, we can't lose sight of the fact that organisations don't operate in a silo, they don't operate in a bubble, they operate within communities, whether that's locally or nationally, or for some people internationally. So what does that community base look like? What are the things that your customers or your client base see as important? I gave a talk recently about kind of the importance of recognising your workforce, but also your external stakeholders, and we were talking about Ramadan as being a perfect example, to say there are people within your communities that are celebrating Ramadan at the moment, participating, fasting, that may have an impact in terms of how they show up, that may have an impact in terms of energy levels, that may have an impact in terms of their need for annual leave or, you know, flexibility around working arrangements. So it's important for business leaders to really understand that. But again, it starts with that data in terms of understanding who's within your ecosystem.
Okay, this might be a little bit controversial, but as you were talking about that, what came into my mind straight away was people that would say, much like pregnancy is another example of it, well, they've chosen to fast. That person's chosen to have a baby, right? So and unfortunately, the vast majority will not think like that, but there's pockets of that kind of attitude, openly or subconsciously. In the scenarios like that, how do, I guess, culturally, how do business leaders and how do people manage that? Have you seen that? Or I've seen a little bit of that. I was just thinking about it.
Yeah, so not necessarily articulated in the same way. We usually see it articulated in this kind of them versus us dynamic, to say, you know, we're celebrating International Women's Day, why can't we celebrate International Men's Day, etc.
That's another good example.
The point around it being a choice is slightly weird for me, I must admit.
But I've heard that. That's why I'm saying it.
I mean, it's just
same with babies, same with
having
having children, same with looking after being a mother and having children, having flexibility, or, you know, and I know it's parents in general, but unfortunately those are undercurrent conversations that are still being had.
There's just so much nuance to it in terms of like, is it always the case that people choose these things? Is it always the case that you know, either implicitly or explicitly, that there's a choice? I think there's so many layers to it, and I think it's very dismissive to say they've chosen it, therefore it's their cross to bear and they just have to live with it.
100% agree.
I think as organisations, we don't operate independently. We, as leaders, rely on people. We rely on them feeling comfortable to do a good job at work, and actually that level of comfort changes depending on what they're going through, whether they're fasting, whether they're pregnant. And this is essentially why we have the Equality Act, to recognise the differences that affect people's lives, and make sure that we don't discriminate against people on that basis, make sure that we don't harass people on that basis, make sure that people aren't victimised on that basis. So the legislation enforces the fact that we have to pay attention of some of these differences. It's not a case of saying this is a choice, so it's their choice to live with. Legally, you'd find yourself in very hot water.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think what it actually shows, when I have seen examples of what you've been saying there, it shows compassion. You know, and it shows that, okay, you know, men's mental health is a really good example. When we talk about suicide prevention and things like that particularly, that's another good example. And it's shown that actually I work for or with an employer that is compassionate, that is accommodating, you know, amongst business needs as well, and that cares about me. You know, that's what I've seen. They care about what's important to me and will accommodate it in a way, again, against business needs that is practical and is realistic. And often those are the environments that have high levels of engagement, often the environments where, you know, people want to stay and they retain within those businesses. So it is an important point, I think, to touch on.
Absolutely. And people appreciate the fact that you know and can relate to what they're going through without them having to have a quote unquote difficult conversation. So if you as a leader send out a message unsolicited to say, you know, happy Ramadan, and there's these kind of provisions, there's a prayer room, or whatever it is that people need, that puts people at ease to say, actually, this organisation gets me, my leader gets me. I don't have to pull my leader to the side and say, you know, I'm fasting at the moment, blah, blah, blah. It just really settles people and makes them feel seen. And I think it's important for leaders to really take the time to do those things.
And I think it often makes for a much more productive workforce. You often think, if I'm working for somebody, you know, with somebody that is accommodating certain things that are really important to me, then gosh, I want to make sure that I'm really giving back to the business in the best way that I can as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that leads us perfectly back to, you know, what the overarching question was in terms of awareness days. Are they great evidence of inclusion, or are they performative? And I think actually, if used in the right way, they can be excellent in terms of inspiring people, raising awareness, educating people about, you know, as a leader, what is it that you're supposed to do for this particular community? What does the data tell us about some of the experiences? Giving people that opportunity to really voice their opinions, their thoughts, their perspectives, and also advocate for themselves. So I think awareness days can be really important in terms of giving a platform to that. However, the dynamic is, if it is just doing for the sake of doing, and you know, I hold my hands up to say, I think in the past we've been guilty of that. So when I talk about the pledge that we made for International Women's Day,
you keep talking about that pledge, man.
You know, it's the one that comes to mind. It's so like vivid. I remember
you thought it at the time.
Yes, but I also vividly remember being super exhausted, and we'd had this message come out from our amazing marketing team to say, this is what we're doing, this is what we need everyone to do, this is what the theme is for this year, so could you take a picture and pledge to do whatever it is that we pledge to do. And I was like, I'm pledging to do something that I know I do naturally. Is that really a pledge? Is that the point of the pledge? And you know, I took the photo, put my hand up and sent it out, and I was like, it just didn't sit well with me, and it felt very performative. It felt like we were just doing it to do something, rather than leaning into a very specific issue or a very specific piece of education or awareness or inspiration. It just felt very disingenuous to some extent.
So that's slightly different. So that's saying that, okay, the way that we might have gone about the awareness day, perhaps I didn't feel like it was the best kind of the way that we could have done that, or had the greatest impact. But the awareness day itself is something that we care about. But I wish we'd done something that was more impactful potentially.
And I think the underlying message there is to really critique yourself and critique your business in terms of, how are we recognising this awareness day? What are we doing that really speaks to who we are as an organisation, really speaks to the challenges that we're facing, and also really speaks to the needs that people tell us that they have, that is linked in some way to this awareness day. And I think the advice that I would give to leaders is to be very intentional about what it is that you're doing to mark these awareness days. Because I think it's so easy to fall into this is the theme for this year, this is what everyone's doing, therefore we're just going to repeat, we're going to copy paste what we've seen. I don't think that's beneficial at all, and it does feel performative.
Well, that's when it is performative, I think.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, same for me. I think actually that if you're gonna celebrate the awareness days, I absolutely think, and actually as this conversation's unfolded and I've been reflecting on different things, and more I've thought actually it is really important. My view anyway, it is really important. It does have an amazing impact, done in the right way.
Yes, absolutely.
Done in the right way, done in a way that's genuine, and that is impactful.
Yeah, and I think it has to, I mean, it doesn't have to, my opinion is that I would like to see more around how do we embed this into our 12-month-long program, so it doesn't feel like it's just the month. So for example, with Pride is the month of June. Okay, we can do festivities around June, we can do the parades, we can do the face paint and the rainbows and the flags, but what are we going to look into our development program, our learning and training approach, how we empower leaders? What does that look like outside of this? Same with Black History Month, South Asian Heritage Month. There's all of these great markers that I think should serve as a prompt to leaders to say, how are we considering this in a 12-month dynamic?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was going to touch on that and just say, okay, that's amazing. Okay, we're talking about the awareness of doing that, but actually what's the impact, number one? How are we hearing or understanding more about a lived experience that may not be our own? That's really, really key here. That's the awareness. But actually, how are we ensuring that, potentially these people or these communities are being representative within our organisation, and what does that look like? Is there something that we need to be doing in the in this area as well? So yeah, good. You give me a different take on it.
Amazing.
Good chat. Yeah, that's good chat. I don't know.
I think
we went to round, or do you want to? We kind of did, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.